Hi, Bernard.
Hi, Carsten. How are you? So the previous tests were easy peasy. Now we do the real thing, right? Which is
The good
testing,
stuff. Yeah.
testing a lot of virtual machines and pressing the last bit out of our storage system, out of your
Exactly.
storage system.
Yes, that's true. And
Okay.
so let's we will create a VMFleet. VMFleet is
Mm-hmm.
a nice. It was PowerShell scripts for a long while, and now it's the new VMFleet is a PowerShell module,
Mm-hmm.
and we will go through the installation. So
Mm-hmm.
we have three requirements, right? We need a
Virtual machine.
VHDX
Mm-hmm.
with an installed Windows server in it. We will do that
Mm-hmm.
now. And then we need the PowerShell module, and we need a test tool, this
Mm-hmm.
SPT. So I start with the virtual machine. I usually
Mm-hmm. Okay.
call it VMFleet template so that I know this is not a real virtual machine. It's just to get
Mm-hmm.
our VHDX with an installed Windows server in it. I do a generation 2 VM.
Mm-hmm.
The memory is really not important because it will set up its own memory sizes. We don't need any network because it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to
It's
have
a
connection.
yeah.
That will be done by VMfleet itself. And
Mm-hmm.
then I create not a 100, 127
Mm-hmm.
gigabyte big VHDX. Even it is dynamic, so it will only occupy the space on the underlying storage system, the how many bytes I copy in. So
Mm-hmm.
usually, let's say 10, 15. But when VMfleet starts, it blows up
Yep.
the template to the maximum size, and
Yeah.
we create a lot of VMs, and we have to copy always this 127. So I go with
Mm-hmm.
25. That's
Okay.
enough for a Windows Core installation and a 10 gigabyte test file. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I choose from cluster storage, collect images. I choose the server eval. That's the newest Windows Server
Okay.
22 data center eval
Mm-hmm.
image. So, and then I connect to the machine and I start it.
Mm-hmm.
I could add I could add another processor, but it's fast enough to install. You can do that.
Yeah.
You don't need to. So I go with an English.
And a German
And yeah,
keyboard.
but I
No.
don't really have to go to into the machine, so we could
Yeah.
also go with an American keyboard, right?
Hmm. And in order to save some time, I think you will use a headless system, right? Which only
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
standard.
it has a small head. It's not completely headless, but
Mm.
it has a small head, right? A core
Hmm.
installation. We
Hmm.
don't need the GUI here.
Yep. It will only, perform the load, and we
Yeah.
don't look at the individual box anyway. So we want it just to produce some load, and that's basically okay. So then once this is finished, um, I assume you shut it down and you park it aside, and then we do other stuff with it.
Exactly. But first we
Okay.
have to do a one-time login. So we have to
Hmm.
set the local administrator password.
Okay.
We need
Yeah.
that later in the deployment.
Hmm.
So imagine in the last installation I've done, there was a goal to reach a certain number of IOs per
Hmm.
second with BitLocker volume. So the
Hmm.
customer had the demand to reach a certain amount. And I will not tell you the amount, but because we want to surprise our viewers a bit what is possible with VMfleet, or at least I
Hmm.
want that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I deployed 75 benchmark VMs per node. And it
Hmm.
was a 6 node cluster. So 75 times 6 is 450 VMs.
Hmm.
And that's easily done with VMfleet. It takes, let's say, 2 hours, but then you have 450 VMs running and can play
Hmm.
with them. And the nice thing with VMfleet is also we can use it to really test out the performance that is possible with our cluster. So the edge scenario, but we can
Hmm.
also tell the VMs, oh, only do 100 IOPS per VM.
Yeah.
So
Which
we
is
get
more
a
realistic.
Yeah, we get a ground load and we can play around with a cluster. Usually,
Mm.
if you set up a cluster, you maybe install two, three, four VMs and then play around. But that's not really a four-node
Real
cluster. You
life.
don't buy a
Yeah.
four-node cluster for four VMs. Maybe if there would be large SQL servers, but usually you have 40, 50, 100
Mm.
VMs running there. And when you want to emulate the behavior of that, you need some plenty VMs. Yeah?
Mhm.
And you can do that too with VMFleet. So I don't use the enhanced session mode. Yeah?
Yep.
I just go in here and set the password.
Hmm.
And for the password, I think if we look at the host, I use this password and I will use it in the virtual machine also.
Hmm.
So let's do this.
So it's
And
not required, but it's just for
yeah, let me see
similarity
the
reason.
password again. AZ
Yeah.
HCI videos 42. So HZHCI videos 42. That's
Hmm.
because the 42 is the number of the videos, right? HZHCI videos 42.
It's the answer to
Okay.
all questions.
Yeah. So we log
Mm.
in one time so that
Mhm.
the profile is generated, and then we shut down the machine without
Mhm.
doing a
No
syscrap.
syscrap.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
just log in once. We don't have to patch the machine. We now
Okay.
just need it as a stupid, so shut down, as a stupid template for our virtual machine.
Mhm.
So we have that
Okay.
now.
Yep.
The next part is to download disk speed, for example, or
Now,
yeah,
well, you don't need to do it any longer because VMFleet was enhanced, so it will download disk speed as well. So
yeah.
don't bother with it.
So
Um,
you see, I'm a little bit unsure how to proceed because I have done maybe thousands of tests with the old VMFlate scripting.
mm,
There were a lot of PowerShell scripts, and they are still available if you download the disk speed
mm,
source code from GitHub. It's a sub project of the disk SPD testing
mhm.
tool. But there is a new one and an enhanced one, and
Yep.
Bernard played around with a new one a lot, and we will of course use the new one and not the old
Yep.
one. So I have
So
my
the
cheat sheet here, right?
yeah. Yeah,
We
so
ins
install module is the name for PowerShell to go out to reach to the PowerShell gallery and to get resources from there. You might need to trust the PowerShell gallery before.
really,
That's
I
what
really have to
the
trust it.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, beware that not only Microsoft guys are uploading their code to that repository, but others could do as well. So be sure that what you're downloading is the right thing. So um, have you installed it already? I mean, yeah, let's see if that
I've
works.
set the install module. We can do it again. It shouldn't
No, no,
hurt,
that
right?
was yeah, I think
It will
it's
not hurt, right? If we
okay.
install it
Let's see.
again, or do you think it will explode? No, it's done.
No, 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 no. Okay, that was quick. I mean, didn't look
Yeah.
watch that out. Okay, so now that you have installed it, now you have imported it. You could do a get module to see it loaded, but the most obvious would be to do a get module and then VMFleet for getting all the commands
That
that
are
this module
available.
brings, right?
Yeah, there are plenty, right? And
Hmm.
in the old VMFleet, we had uh,
Yeah.
apparently a script for every module.
Yeah.
So this is much
So
nicer.
before you do the next step, like install Fleet, right? That would require you to set up the cluster shared volumes, but you did it already. You have a collect
Yes,
volume, you have,
yes.
for every node, you have a volume that is named as the node, right? That's, one requirement that you would have. Um,
Yeah, you
but
see it
if you
here.
have, yes, so
Yeah. So we have to have a
that's
collect volume
right.
that's hard coded, and then we have
Hmm.
to have a
Yeah.
volume for every host in our cluster. And we did that
And you,
already, so we
mhm,
don't have
and
to
you
do something here.
Yeah, and you may have a look at the collect volume just to see, the contents of it because it will change afterwards after
Yeah.
we did the installation
Yeah,
Yeah,
I want
might
to look
use.
into it. Yeah, use
Yeah,
this one. You're right.
yeah, no worries.
It's already
Um,
late.
yeah, all good. So be aware that there will be some further content there. You may leave it open and run the other command,
I
the
will do that.
last one.
Yeah. And it will be at least the other scripts did a
Mm,
um, control directory with some subdirectories,
same
and
here.
I assume it will be the same.
Yeah,
So
same.
we do this:
Yep.
install VMFleet,
Hmm.
put it here, and verbose is always good because it tells us some
So see, there is
things.
the option for downloading disk speed,
Oh, that's nice. So we
and
don't have to do it separately; it does it itself.
and if you go back to your folder now, it should contain the stuff, right? So you see the control directory, the result, the
Oh,
tools, and the flag.
yeah.
So that's the
Yeah, that is
VMFleet
different
structure.
now.
Mm,
In control, there were some scripts, and then we had flag, result, and
mm,
tools in the control directory, but
okay,
now it's at the same level, but that's okay.
okay,
So in tools, did it already install disk speed in tools? Yes, it did. So that's usually something
okay.
you if you do it the first time, you maybe forget to copy the
Mm,
benchmarking tool disk SPD to the tools directory, and here it's done for you. So this is already an improvement, one step you can't
mhm.
mess up. Okay.
Okay, next thing is we don't have our VMs yet, but that would be the next command, right? So you have the template, but now we need to create the big bunch of virtual machines. And there's
Yeah.
also a command for that in the
Right.
module that we've just downloaded. And Carsten is typing it in, which is, no, it's called new fleet. It's not VM fleet.
Ah,
Sometimes the naming is a little bit, yeah, but
okay. Good to
and
know.
then you would need to type in the base VHD file for the template that you have chosen or created. I think, yeah, you have uploaded it to, yeah, there.
I know the path by heart.
Sorry, sorry.
The next one is how many VMs we want to deploy on every node. And there
Hmm.
will be plenty, but there's one trick because we have to give it two pairs of credentials, and
Hmm.
you can mistype the credentials. And
Hmm.
let's say we want to do 25 VMs.
Mm.
So if we started now with 25 VMs, we wait maybe 45 minutes to an hour or 30
Mhm.
minutes, and then
Mhm.
we start them and we see errors because they
Mm.
can't log in. So I do first one VM per host. And if
Yeah.
that one VM works, I say, okay, now do 25. And it's so clever that it sees, oh, we have already one deployed. We don't have to deploy the one again. We start with a second and so on. Yeah, so
Yeah, and
let's do
I
one.
learned that session from a famous VMfleet fan. So I do that by myself for
Okay.
exactly the same reason. Yeah.
So the admin password now is the password of the administrator in the template. So
Yeah.
we used administrator and this password AZHCI VDOS42.
Yep.
Yeah, and we
That's
have
it.
to type it in clear text. The next
Hmm.
one would be the admin. I think you can leave it out, but I do it.
Yes.
Administrator, and
Right.
maybe it's safer to leave it out so it
Mm.
will do it correctly. The next one is the connect
Connect.
password, and this has to be a local administrator account on the node. So you have to have the same local administrator account on every node in your cluster, and it has to have the same password. So if you
Hmm.
use something like I think it's called labs or something like that, where you have a different strong password on every node, you can't do that. You have to set the same password. And unfortunately, it's also clear text here, and it's the
Hmm.
same than before. You saw me in the
Hmm.
virtual in this different machine. I set this password, and I hope it
Yep.
works. And the last thing is the local
Connect.
administrator account. So where was it?
It's the
Oops, no.
connect user.
Yeah, there it is. So it's
Mm.
also administrator, but this is a local
Mm.
administrator on the hosts. Yeah.
Yep.
So now
So
fingers crossed.
yep.
Let's deploy one VM. Oh no.
Let's yes. And things that can go wrong here, and that's, I think, still the case with that version of VMFleet. If you have complex passwords with special characters, right, so huge strings with
Yeah,
underscores, exclamation marks, semicolons, and whatnot,
yeah.
it might break because it has. I don't think it is properly escaped in the code. So
Hmm.
sometimes the passwords crack the tool, and therefore, in order to get it working, you might temporarily use a
Different password.
too simple password, right?
Yeah.
But only temporary. Okay.
Yeah, you see something here. It creates an internal VM
Hmm.
switch on every host, and the VMs later, you can tell the VMs what they have to do, and you can
Hmm.
change, for example, a script, and the VMs will notice that and immediately load the new script and do what's in the script. And for that, every VM needs a way to get to these changes. So they choose it very clever. They create an internal switch. An internal switch is a Hyper-V switch where only VMs on the same host that are connected to the internal switch and the host itself. The host itself
Hmm.
has also an internal adapter. We can do
Hmm.
this here, get net adapter, and you see our adapters, and here you see another virtual adapter. So this is
Hmm.
a virtual adapter on the fleet internal script, and this adapter can communicate with the VMs that are also connected to this internal switch.
Hmm.
And so the VMs don't they don't have fixed IP addresses, so they try to reach a DHCP server. But we don't have a DHCP server on this internal switch. So what does a VM do if it can't get a DHCP address from a server? It uses an IP per
IP
address. So
address.
it's
Yes.
169.254,
Mm.
and then for the last two octets a random number.
Hmm.
So the trick here is that every host has the same IP config, has the same IP address on this fleet internal, on this virtual adapter, and it is the 169.254.1.1. The VMs get a similar address in the same network. It's a class B network. And then
Hmm.
they can communicate with the host. And then they can use this administrator account to go to the C, C dollar share. It's an administrative share, and it can reach every data
Hmm.
on the host, and also cluster the cluster storage,
Yeah.
collect, control directory. Unfortunately, this is the same address if you have Dell servers. The iDRAC, if you enable the communication from your host to the iDRAC system, there's a virtual adapter. The iDRAC has the same address. So, and you get a virtual adapter with a 1.2. So if your iDRAC is enabled or the virtual adapter, you can't do VMFleet. So you have to disable the virtual adapter, the iDRAC adapter on the host to use VMFleet. If you've
Mm.
done your test, you can enable it again, and you can your host can communicate with the iDRAC with system, but you can't do both at the same time. So this is a little bit of a tip because a lot of
Yeah.
implementations are Dell based, and maybe there are other BMCs that have the same problem.
Yeah. Might be,
Okay, we
yes. And your cluster you see that the cluster network, showing up, and the cluster might, be complaining a little bit about it, but as long as it is for the test, I could
we
live
can
with
turn
it,
it
right?
off. Yeah.
Okay.
So
But
here you
anyways,
see,
okay. Yeah. Let's, start one and see if it should, or if it behaves as it should, right?
yeah, we do that.
Because now
So
it should boot up. It should automatically, get into or log on automatically with the credentials that Carsten has provided when setting up
that
the VM fleet,
yeah, this already went
and
through.
that's how it should look like, right? So it tries to connect to the network, to the master node, and then it waits. It
Yeah, this
sees
is
it.
nicer with this one. In
Mm,
the last one, you saw some tries, and then you saw red
mm,
pause enforce, and then you get dots for every, I
Yep.
don't know, 30 seconds.
Yep.
And be aware, the red paused is
Mm.
good here. So it's not an
Yep.
error. The developer has a weird understanding of coloring, I would say, because red is usually
Mm.
a fault, but here red is good. It can read the file, and you see it here. We have an SMB mapping. The
Mhm.
the the drive L is mapped to the local the hardware server where the VM is running on,
Yep.
C drive, cluster storage, collect, and it sees there is a test file and everything is fine. We are in
It
pause
does.
mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
So
does not
it waits.
only, yeah, it's
Yeah.
waiting, and that's what we want to see, right? So, and the good thing is, I mean, it doesn't only take a job from there. It also reports back what it is, what its results are, right? So it's,
Hmm.
uh, uh, and there's one thing, or
Yeah.
maybe we can do that later on, right? So if you go back to your PowerShell command line, an interesting thing, because sometimes you want to check the state of your virtual machines. If they are up and running, you could query them. So you could go for get fleet VM with a minus
Yeah. What?
control
Yeah.
message,
Wait. Get
right? Fleet
fleet.
computer, I think it was, sort of, or VM, I'm not quite sure. No, then it is VM.
Version VM.
Yep.
Yeah. And
And then
then.
a control message. Yeah, control response, sorry. It was a control response. And then it will query out all the VMs, right? So if you go to pipe it to a table, that's better, not a list like of FT. Yes. And then you would see, hey, one is up and running and the others are offline, or maybe, the communication is going wrong. Um, if that happens, sometimes you can do a repair fleet VM, and then it will maybe try to reinitiate the network connection or restart them and set up the communication again. So that's sometimes a useful check, right? Because if you want to do load testing, you want to make sure that the load can be generated by the virtual machines that are up and running. If you only have 5, then it's not a fun, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
So I will finish up now. I will
mhm,
deploy 25 VMs on each node. So we will have 100 VMs, test VMs, and I think that's good to go there.
mhm.
Of course, your volumes that you create have to have the space to fit them. So we have 25 gigabyte per VM plus a little bit,
Mhm.
and 25 times 25 should be. I think we could deploy 40. 40 times 25 is roughly a terabyte.
Okay.
So let's go overboard. We will start with the next video when the deployment is done, and then we play around with VMFleet, right?
Okay, so this is
So
going to be a late night video. Maybe the light will be darker.
no, I
Well,
think
we'll
it will
see.
be on
But
another day.
but one more thing. I mean, once these ones are created, it will create 35 on every node.
Hmm.
And the idea is also, the disk that belongs to the virtual machine will also be, on that node. How do
Hmm.
we do that, or how does VMfleet do it? Well, there is a cluster shared volume that is owned by the node. Um, and then, it will, you could see it also from the naming.
Hmm.
However, you could also, and it would be tested automatically, right? So that the virtual machine that is destined for node number 1 will start on node number 1.
Yeah.
However, you could have, in a normal life on an HCI system, it's not always aligned, right? So you would probably see that the virtual machines are being laying around. The disk is belonging to a different server then, and there's also a command for simulating that kind of workload
Yeah.
pattern. So
Yeah.
for um,
But before our viewers get the
mm,
wrong impression, you don't
yeah,
have to align the CSV to
yeah,
the
no,
host where the VM is running. I think they overdo it here. And in
mm,
fact, we can do that later when we play
yeah,
around. We can move VMs to another host and disalign it, and there is not really an effect. And
yeah,
I even saw in in real life, even
Mm.
it's getting a bit faster if the VMs are running on a
Yeah.
different volume,
Yep.
not on the owner. But here
Hmm.
it's very aligned. So you see here,
Yeah.
I went into the properties of the cluster role of this the first VM on the second node, and you see VMFleet even says the preferred owner for the
Mm.
VM is the host with the same name.
Yeah.
So when the cluster is able, it will start the VM on the node on the preferred owner. It can run on others, but
Hmm.
it will try to start it here. So very, very tightly programmed. So they try to do everything right. But in my experience, that's not really
Yeah,
necessary,
and it.
right?
I mean, remember the tool is old. This was maybe a good practice years ago before S2D or with different storage layout, right?
Yeah,
Whereas right now, I mean, the interesting thing is that you shouldn't see a difference, right? Even
exactly.
if
And
you're
we can look at that.
moving. Yeah. Okay,
So
so that will
look
take
here.
a while,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
look here, it already saw there were the first
Mhm,
VMs were already deployed, so it jumps over it. I like that because you
mhm,
can start with 10 VMs, so with one, then go to
yep.
10. If that's not enough load, you go to 15 to 20. You can top it up, and it
Mhm,
will only deploy the new VMs, right?
okay.
Okay, so we are done in this video, and we will see each other, I think, on another day with playing around with VMFleet, and this will maybe also not only one part. We will see.
Mhm. See you
See
guys.
you in the next one. Bye.